The church was decided by the conference. They had a system whereby they allotted each church, each denomination, a location, and they had allotted the Congregational Church the Ladera location.
We'd want to have kind of an innovative church, and it wouldn't be just your ordinary traditional church.
They took a survey of the community to see how many people were interested, and I was free on the weekends, so I volunteered to help them get started on the weekends.
I remember sitting on Phyllis Lever's patio, and Mel Pratt gave the sermon. We looked out onto the wonderful Golden Hills, and that was Ladera Church in the early days.
We were able to get the school multipurpose room for the church service. The Knoll family, Mr. Knoll was a teacher in Palo Alto High School, and they lived here in Ladera. Mrs. Knoll died, and they gave their house to the church for a parsonage up in Ladera. And so when the Peabodys came, there was a house for them to live in there. So that was really a miraculous thing.
And it didn't sound like it was a church that had a lot of rules and things that you had to believe when maybe you didn't really believe in those things. You know, it was a church where you explored things together, and you didn't have to conform to any particular set of rules.
Peabody, Reverend Peabody, as our first minister, because he fit in with all this simplicity and all this non-regimental sort of cooperation of everyone. And I think I know when he decided he couldn't stay any longer, that I think Charles was on the committee to find somebody, and Charles said, we have to find somebody who can walk on water.
Well, he seemed to get such a joy out of his religion, and he projected that. And I think that's what drew the people to him.
It took us years before we were able to get a site because they sold the original one.
1958, something important happened to the Ladera Community Church, and that's the home missions loan. They offered us enough money to get started from the home missions, and that began the planning and the building in 1958. And Stephen Peabody was the minister, bless his heart, and he only gave me one instruction. He said, Victor, it should not be a precious building. Now, what advice for an architect? What could you do with that?
We met at Max Crittenden's home, and we discussed what we wanted, and I know I wanted a belfry. Steeple.
The first churches in the world were tents. And there was a huge, huge, huge oak tree, and we wanted to focus the church with its glass wall facing the oak tree.
And the church had a rather unique design.
And of course, Jerry practically hand-built the church.
Well, he did.
Designed by Vic Thompson.
4 months in construction. The whole thing was a unit. And when you were there, you were all together. The whole congregation and the chancel was movable and could be put in different places.
One thing is that everybody participated in one way or another. It was a feeling of being new and exciting.
The church building, I think that's been part of the magic, because it was something to be formed. It wasn't so finished that it couldn't change with us. And I think that people joined so they could be part of the continuing formation of our church.
The wonderful copper cross was produced by Merle Stearns, and the copper is the wave tubes of the linear accelerator. And Merle had them made into a cross for us.
Franco should be mentioned because he also built the cross and the table, as I remember it.
Beautiful table.
And designed even the benches.
But Isabel Crittenden was very important in the early days because she published a little newsletter. She had a ditto machine. Do you remember the ditto purple ink? And she ran those purple ink dittos off to keep us informed. We built all the pews ourselves by hammers and nails, and we wanted them to be movable so we could have different arrangements within the tent-like building, you see.
So all of us ladies went up to Mary Duckworth's. We cut blue corduroy material and covered foam pieces with the blue corduroy. That was what was on the benches. So they looked a bit homemade.
Ruth Crittenden said, build that patio. And we said we didn't have the money, and she said, that's no
We'll
easy.
get it.
We'll get it.
They had to get it low enough to get the ceiling in the Peabody Hall, and that's why the patio is sunk here, because they had to dig out this area.
The fireside room was not here in the beginning. There was a breezeway through here, and it was decided to make it into a vestibule or narthex and a fireside room.
Isabel's, my first wife's brother was the head of Heath Ceramics, and Edith Heath was the designer there. And then some of the tiles on the hearth are from there, and people wrote their names in the tile.
It was just about 2 years after we got started in 1956 that we realized that missions was a part of the church at large, and Mr. Peabody was here by then, and he had a great interest in missions. He had worked in China, and of course I had my interest in Turkey, and so it was decided that we would have a World's Fair. All in all, every country where our church works was portrayed, and the importance of the work that was being done there was shown.
There was a great interest when Mrs. Peabody was here. She was an outreach minister's wife. She was very much interested in the migrant. This was the time when the migrants were having, Cesar Chavez was having a hard time getting enough money for his workers, and there were a lot of churches interested in helping the migrant families, and we had some migrant families come up and visit. At one of the big potlucks we had up at the multi-use room, one of the first ones that I remember, was the theme was outreach to the whole world, and Mrs. Peabody set that up, and she had different displays of how the church has outreach, this one included, to different parts of the world.
Well, Social Action Committee, Renee Wilsnack and I and Isabel were often involved in that, and we had ideas that we thought the church should espouse. They weren't always accepted, but it was for us an important part of the church life that they were interested in. There have been things like helping families of people in prison, and then providing benefits for people in East Palo Alto, whether it's clothing or just needs that they have.
In 1980, when we brought over the little family, we built a cottage.
They had made their way from Laos to a refugee camp in Thailand, where the cottage was built about maybe a year later, because they lived with the Coles, and then they lived with the Crittendens, James Crittenden.
Sing Changs came. It was after we had the manse next door, because some people felt we should have put it on the manse property instead of here on the church property. But I'm not sure why the complications. They put it here. It was easier for them to put it on the church property at that time than on the manse property.
I gave them a set of World Book and taught him how to use it. And I would read to him. And this kid that could never sit still would sit there mesmerized all the time I read to him. They had an arrangement with Stanford, people that came with serious medical problems, a member of the family. Well, it was expensive to stay in hotels, so we rented it very inexpensively to those people.
For a while, we had some of the people who were working at the Children's Hospital, where they have a program to train ministers for hospital service. They come for a year and get their training as hospital chaplains. And for a while we housed some of those here. And then now we have this Russian family here. So.
Everyone used to say from years and years ago that for a small church that we had the most remarkable choir. And I think everyone would agree with that.
Mary Helen was from the university where Charles and I went, and so we knew them immediately when they moved next door to us. And the minute she heard their Bill Levers went to her house, she immediately wanted to start a choir. That was her main objective, and she did, and she was very creative, and she loved being the choir director, and she did very innovative things.
The choir was started by Mary Helen Richards when we first met in the multi-use room. In fact, one of the first beautiful songs I said, "He Watching Over Israel," was one of the first ones that she had us sing up there.
I remember a lot of the great things we did with Mary Helen Richards and the earlier years.
She had a personality that was both winning and somewhat off-putting at times, and she knew how to use that.
She played the piano and directed. And then when I came, she said, "You play the piano and I can direct."
And then there was a man named Bill Hilborn. I remember a rehearsal when Aurelia had us start learning one of the pieces of it, the one that involves a soprano solo. And she didn't use these words, but at the moment that we were starting, she could have said, "Hit it, Diana." And Diana started singing the solo, which begins it. And the choir was so carried away that when it was time for the choir to come in,
nobody did. And Aurelia stopped and she said, "Come on, choir, it's your turn now."
She was truly dedicated to the choir and its performances, and she was the one who led us in those marvelous entertainments that the choir used to put on.
Gigi Fitzmaurice and Ron Wade had various stints. And then we got Julie King.
Kathleen and I were just reminiscing about what they call, what we used to call music for a summer evening, when we would do non-religious music, and we did I think the Pirates of Penzance.
And then during Marty's last stint as choir director, Mark Hansen was our accompanist, and after Marty left, Mark agreed to take over both being our pianist and our choir director, and Marty's assistant to the president.
The Sunday school represents what will happen in 10 years. And if your Sunday school is going great, and ours certainly is going great, that we should have a good representation of young people in the future. And that's what it's all about.
For years, we had the Sunday school scattered in homes.
And Jerry brought over a 4x8, big piece of plywood, and two sawhorses. And we put that upstairs in my loft and made a little worship center with a candle and a cross, and the kids went up there, and then we had our little story.
And the conference gave us $200 for Sunday school materials, and so we operated for 2 years on $200.
Rennie Wilsnack, who had 2 small children at home, she took on the Sunday school when we were still meeting in the school, and just was absolutely, I don't know where she found the energy and time, but she really had that Sunday school organized. Edna Atchison, she was a semi-retired director of Christian education, and she worked all the time, I think, on the church, building up the church Sunday school.
Merle Seibert was a marvelous sustaining force in the church. He just quietly came down and readied all the classrooms and saw that he was on, and that the chalkboards were all prepared and equipment was all ready, and he ran it beautifully and quietly.
The young children at the beginning of the church grew up into high schoolers, and we had a big PF group and quite an active youth group.
I felt that the church was really important to our children, like Eric and Jody and John, to Charles Cole and his PF and things like that, where really all the children enjoyed the whole thing like that. And our Sunday school was, the kids enjoyed coming down and going to Sunday school and liking the church.
And I remember one of our early services when Frank Cole took his Sunday school class to climb the tree. Oh. All the church was going on, these Sunday school kids were climbing the tree. Remember that?
Young people, students in the community were all welcome at PF. You didn't have to be a member of Ladera Church. So it pulled in a lot of just high school age, middle school and high school age kids.
One of the exciting things was we started the junior high Pilgrim Fellowship, and our oldest child was in junior high, which of course we were interested in seeing it started, and the Coles pitched in and helped too. And we had the first meeting of the Pilgrim Fellowship in one of the upstairs rooms before the rooms were even finished. And then Charles, of course, went on to become a sort of super youth leader. The church really, really benefited from it.
Well, he was very effective, of course, you know. The kids just loved him.
For a while, we kind of had a dip in the number of children, although they continued to have the school here, the nursery school, and there were a lot of community children went through that, even though they were not in the church. But now it's picked up again, and we're about, I guess, to get into another youth era.
They realized that this would be just such a wonderful opportunity to meet the needs of this community and have a nursery school here. They weren't sure they could do it, but they did. And, you know, some wonderful people worked very hard, long hours, and dedicated people, and it happened.
Mary Ellen Pattee was the first real director, and she was there for several years until they left to go back east. And then Sue Addicott, who had been a teacher, along with Bessie Linville, also became the director.
The curriculum was based on play. The children learned through play.
Grounds have all been financed by the preschool, all the play structures. One of the first ones was sort of an A-frame type that was in what they call the forest playground above the parking lot. Burge Clark, who was the famous Palo Alto architect, and so he designed this little play structure for us. And then my brother-in-law, Carl Larson, who had a child in the preschool, loves woodworking, and so he constructed it, and it lasted for probably 25 years or so.
And the playground has been marvelous. I still get a lift when I walk up, look out at the playground and the trees around it and the mountains beyond.
So, and they went from 16 children in 1966 to over 100 today with a waiting list. So
Tom Hunter wrote wonderful songs that we used in the preschool, and he was one of the musicians that went to the national conventions of early childhood educators.
After we had been here for some time, I kind of became aware that there was this empty space out there between here and the manse, and decided that it would be fun to have a vegetable garden. And so I would go down to the urban ministry on Friday and line up some homeless people and come out here, and that's kind of how the garden got started. Once in a while I get different kinds of volunteers. Some are youth groups, but the homeless that was being paid at one point, they stopped paying them, and they find other things, I guess, that they would like to volunteer for. Then the income that we get from it, from people donating for the vegetables, goes to the urban ministry. But I had built a chicken coop that's made up of materials that was donated. It's a crystal cathedral of chicken coops. We had acquired some cats down at the Palo Alto train station where there was a garden, and when Palo Alto decided that they had some other uses for that land, the cats needed a place to go, and so not only do we have chickens out here, the cats appeared, and so the chicken coop was divided so that part of it is a cat coop.
In addition, that was quite exciting a few years ago, the Pratts of this church, son and daughter-in-law, run some cattle up at Skyline on some property belonging to the family, and they discovered that a calf had been born who was being abandoned by his mother, and so they asked Bob in the church if it would be all right to bring the calf down here and take care of him until he could get back to the rest of them. So the calf appeared, and Tina Pratt was sort of his caretaker, and the kids in the Sunday school named him Jonah, and he was the big attraction around here for quite a while.
To sleigh. You'll be so glad you came. The games are such fun, the food is great, the company is the same.
To see the kids playing together, the little kids and then the older kids that were little at one time and then growing up and still want to go to Bass Lake. And families getting together more than just meeting for an hour at church. So
I think it's a wonderful family.
It's a great church because all these activities are very imaginative.
When we were up there initially, the cabins were real military cabins, no screens, cosmoline canvas that rolled down and
Just
shut off
full of
all
dust.
breeze. Full of dust. It was much more rustic than it has since become.
It's Asilomar, beautiful, right on the ocean, in the famous buildings by our Bay Area lady architect,
What's her name?
Julia Morgan.
Spring salad luncheon, which was a big affair. And you invited friends to join you for lunch, and then you made a salad, and everybody brought a salad. And then you set up bridge tables in Peabody Hall, and you set it with your own cloth and everything, and brought your cards, and then everybody played bridge. The food was always so good, and I said to Phyllis Levers once, we should really have a cookbook. Nobody would give us a recipe, and so we finally started making up using our own recipes, and we put fictitious names under them. And we sold it for $2, I think, and we were afraid that was too much money, but we sold it. They sold like hotcakes.
The Advent wreath is very much associated with Rennie. And of course at Thanksgiving she did a wreath for Thanksgiving. When she and Jerry were working in Germany after World War II in a relief camp area, at the harvest season, it wouldn't have been Thanksgiving of course, but in the community room there was this wreath hanging up, and there was really nothing to put on it because there was no lavish harvest. So I think it had some potatoes and onions on it, was what they had to hang on it. And so then for this church, Rennie has always made one at Thanksgiving with fruits and vegetables and wheat and so forth. Rennie Wilsnack had been making an Advent wreath every year. And I don't know how it happened, but Jerry had made the frame for it, and the same frame is still in use today. That's been used for all these years. And at some time or other, Rennie started coming to our house to make the wreath. Now, I wasn't very good at the wreath making part, but I would go out in the morning and collect the mounds and mounds of greens, right? To have many different kinds. That's what makes a good wreath. I'm quoting Rennie.
I can look down, at Christmas time, we can look from every room on the downside of our house and see the star. So I call that my Christmas star, and I always call Ruth Cole when it's up and say, oh, my star is up. And then she calls me and says, let me know if it goes out.
For years, first Charles went up, and then his son and the two Cole boys, not the Frank Cole son and Charles Cole's son, put it up until
The tree got so big that it was...
And then they moved it to the other tree. It used to be on the cypress, and now it's on the redwood tree. Pat Walker was the very beginning of the first ornament, and I think I worked...
Yes, I remember.
The doe ornament.
I had one of those.
Anybody that's worked on that remembers the different houses we set up as kind of a Santa's workshop.
One year we made these